And we're live. So to everybody tuning in, this is our second video in our Leaders in the Force interview series. My name is First Lieutenant Juan Velasquez, and I am a instructor at Florida A&M University Army ROTC. Today with me I have Warrant Officer 1 Burch. I know Warrant Officer 1, I call you Mr. Burch, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Burch, I know Mr. Burch from our time in the 2nd Cavalry Regiment in Vilseck, Germany, where I was Mr. Burch's platoon leader, and he was first a sergeant, and then I saw him pick up staff sergeant. So originally, Sergeant Burch was my gunner for my striker, and then eventually he became one of my squad leaders. So, Mr. Burch, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to contribute to a lot of cadets' learning, edification. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself, how you started in the Army, why you decided to join.
So I actually joined the Army, sir, 2 weeks after I left high school. I was in the delayed entry program. I knew I wanted to join the military. I knew I wanted to get out of my hometown. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, which is not a predominantly good area, and I know I just wanted to leave the area and travel the world. So that's what I did. I joined 2012, 2 weeks after I graduated high school, and I left for basic training. I was OSUT, one station unit training, which I was able to do all in one place, one battalion, everything, same company with the same people for the infantry. And then from there, I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and that was my first duty station. One of my biggest contributors to joining the military was obviously to leave my hometown and to be able to experience the world and what it had to offer.
Okay, so I can relate to that. When I was making the decision which college to go to, I knew that I didn't want to stay in Miami. I just wanted to fly, metaphorically.
Yeah.
So I went to school in New York. But yeah, I can sympathize with wanting to get out there and see the world. And a lot of people join the Army for that reason, because the Army gives us that opportunity. You know, for if you're watching this and you're a cadet, you're not too familiar. I was stationed in Germany with Sergeant Burch, with Mr. Burch. He's been to Fort Campbell. You did a tour in Korea, I recall. You know, you can be stationed in, yeah, all over the country and all over the world, to include Italy, East Asia, right? So the Army gives us that opportunity. Okay, so you kind of led us into a bit of the second question as well, which is explaining your branch and MOS and why you chose the infantry. But before that, let's just discuss quickly what a warrant officer is, because currently, and can we see your rank?
So yes, sir. I don't know if you can see it. It's just a W1, just one little dot in there. A warrant officer is a technical and tactical expert in their field. So me as an aviator, I am still in the flight program right now, but me as an aviator, I am learning to be the technical and tactical expert of my airframe whenever it is assigned to me. So right now we're on the UH-72 Lakota. It is my job to know basically everything, the ins and outs of that Lakota, not only just to fly it, but I have to know my EPs, my limits, my quick math, my map designators, how to fly the thing, you know, what does this button do, what does that button do? And that is the job of an aviator warrant officer, is be that technical and tactical expert on that aircraft at all times.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I have a feeling that our cadets listening in aren't really too familiar with what a warrant officer is. So there's enlisted soldiers who can, you know, progress through the ranks and become non-commissioned officers, starting at the rank of actually corporal and then sergeant. Then there's the warrant officer corps, which Mr. Burch just described, and then there's the commissioned officer corps, which everybody listening as a cadet is aspiring to join. Okay, so warrant officers, like he said, are technical, tactical experts, subject matter experts. Okay, but before you got accessed and accepted warrant officer candidate school, please tell us about what you were before.
So I was an infantryman before. As I stated earlier, I did one station unit training, which is basically I did my basic training and my advanced individual training all in one location at Fort Benning, Georgia, with the same company, the same people, and everything. It was. Oh, I'll back up a little bit. I am one of the few people who actually chose the infantry. The recruiters didn't choose it for me. It felt right for my personality at the time. I've seen a lot growing up, and I wanted to experience, the gung-ho fighter style. I wanted to, be the things they wrote in the movies. I wanted to, move, shoot, communicate, and, growing up and seeing all the different movies, especially about combat arms, you always see that there's never another brotherhood that tight. There's no other MOS group together that is such a family as it is in the combat arms world. And that's what really drew me in, is just having that camaraderie and that brotherhood with your people left and right to you. And that's what has driven me so far forward.
Okay, thank you for that. I can relate to that as well. When I was gearing up to choose where I wanted to go for college, at first I started looking at the Air Force Academy and the idea of being a pilot for the Air Force. But the more I thought about it, that's just you and the airframe, right? No offense to what you're about to do, but I didn't see a lot of like raw leadership experience the same way when I saw the Army and I learned about West Point. I saw an infantry platoon leader with a platoon of 40 soldiers. That's a lot of opportunities for direct leadership. So I sought that out as well. So same camaraderie, same brotherhood. When you go through adversity with a team, that team grows closer. So
absolutely,
we both sought similar things within the infantry branch, and that can be applied to other combat arms branches as well, such as armor, artillery. Okay. Cool. So, as an infantryman, 11 Bravo, what did you like about the branch, and if you choose to disclose some things that you didn't like about it?
As I said before, I love knowledge. I love reading. I love learning. So being in the infantry, I got to learn tons of life skills, tons of diversity from meeting with other people, not just including in the MOS, but just life in general. Now, with including in the job itself, I got to learn all about, small unit tactics. I got to learn how to enter building clear rooms, clear stairwells, weapons maintenance, learning how to fix weapons on the spot, and learning to work with people from all around the world. When you get into situations where you have to put your life on the line and you have to put your life in other people's hands, it really builds a backbone of the brotherhood itself. So I would have to say, like, the diversity of the people you work with is one thing that I cherish and I learned a lot, as well as the ability to lead, the ability to not only follow directions, but the ability to lead others into combat, into even training scenarios. Even the simplest things in the world, you learn to lead, you learn to delegate responsibly, and to learn to trust those around you and not just do everything on your own. And that was a hard learning step for me in my early career.
Okay. So one thing that I want to clarify, just so we don't, step on our own toes, the Army that you grew up in, right? And then up to a certain point, the Army that I joined, it was just a brotherhood in the infantry. But fortunately, in 2016, the combat arms branches opened up to include women. So that's something that we are accepting of and transitioning into as more women join the ranks in infantry, armor, and FA. So I just want to clarify that, like, when we say brotherhood, I think it's just like a legacy term, a residual term, but it's absolutely a place for everybody, right? And leaders in those branches are working hard to, I guess, promote that culture of inclusivity, that we welcome soldiers from all walks of life. Yeah. So that's what you liked about the infantry, and I can definitely attest to that. Subject matter expert, as a non-commissioned officer, I remember you gave me the ins and outs of the 50 cal, the striker platform, and that's kind of what a platoon leader learns to rely on their NCOs for. The platoon leader comes in with minimal technical experience, just the technical training they received at the schoolhouse, but it's really those NCOs that they look to be those subject matter experts on their platforms and weapon systems.
Yes,
and then
and to go into dislike. Oh, go ahead, sir.
No, you go ahead.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword when you talk about dislike. You dislike the proverbial quote unquote the suck, the harshness of it, but you learn to love it because it builds you closer, as you said earlier. And then the dislikes as well is you don't always feel like you get to do your job. As being in the infantry, it's not the same as being in like a quartermaster, a supply clerk, or logistics, where you can actually do your trained job every day. Being in the infantry, you can train every day, but there's minute things come down, layout, tasking, details, and usually we're the first to be called on, because if we're not training, then, we're not actually doing our job. So I think that would be one of my biggest dislikes about the infantry in general.
So that brings up a good point. If the logistician's job is to supply the force, you're supplying the force even if you're in garrison, right, in a non-deployed environment. But if the infantry's job is to be close with and destroy the enemy, I guess we're fortunate if we don't have those kinetic conflicts ongoing. But at the very least, we'll always be ready. So I have heard that, and I do concede that a lot of people can get disillusioned with training, but never actually getting to do the thing. But I would say, like war is something that we don't really seek out, but at least, we're always prepared to answer the call if that time comes. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So you made it all the way to staff sergeant before you transitioned over to warrant officer. So you had the privilege of leading soldiers at the fire team level and then at the squad level. So having been a team leader and a squad leader under many different officers, commanders, platoon leaders, what would you say are the qualities that make a successful, good platoon leader?
Being understanding, sir. So I've been in the Army 10 years now, and I've seen lieutenants from every walks of life, from every college, from every program you can imagine. The ability to want to come in understanding and wanting to come in to learn is one of the best qualities you can have as a platoon leader. I've seen multiple times where a platoon leader will come in, a company commander will come in, and they try to change the whole flow of their platoon or their company. Like, okay, hey, you used to do it this way, now you're going to do it this way. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Then instead of it being a family and a very smooth flowing organization, it turns into what seems to be a dictatorship. I think as a platoon leader, you coming in, start with your platoon sergeant, then start with your squad leaders and work your way down. You should be familiar with everybody in your platoon to the lowest Joe. And you should know about his family. You should know, about his birthday, what's his likes, dislikes, things of that nature, and how you, as the senior ranking individual in that platoon, can help advance his life and his career, if that's with education or schools or whatever you can offer him. I think being understanding and learning that you have to fit into the flow of the organization, not just make the organization your own, would be the best quality.
So if I were to summarize that, be a little bit of humility, I think. Humility.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Understanding that, yes, the platoon will take direction from the platoon leader, and because that platoon leader is ultimately responsible, but it's just not going to work as well if you go in there with a heavy hand thinking you got all the right answers. Because honestly, I can tell you from having been in that position, you absolutely do not have the right answers. What you do have is, the ability to make moral judgments, moral decisions. We proverbially say that the commissioned officer is the moral compass of the platoon. There's a lot of character development training that goes into commissioning programs for that reason. But ultimately, that platoon leader needs to take recommendations and should take recommendations from the NCO support channel, because the NCOs in that platoon have been there. They've had 2 or 3 platoon leaders before you. They know what works. So I agree. Humility. You don't know everything, and you definitely need the buy-in from your NCOs and soldiers, because they will go to the end of the world for you if they feel inspired to do so. And I mean, I remember 3 weeks into me being a platoon leader, the night before we left for Kriegsadler 1, Baumholder, Germany, it was what, 15-hour drive, and you were spending, the last few hours that you had with your family, away from your family in the motor pool, getting that Comanche 1-2 vehicle up and ready for the mission. And that's a sacrifice that you put in, because you felt committed to the platoon, you felt committed to the mission. So people won't do that, won't put in that level of effort if their leaders don't create an environment that's inspiring.
I couldn't agree with you more, sir.
Okay, so it's a pretty similar question. What would you recommend for developing a positive and successful relationship between your squad leaders and the platoon leader?
Like I said earlier, sir, is just get to know your soldiers, even from your squad leaders down. Like, the biggest thing for me is, I'm very family oriented. I have a wife, I have 3 kids, I have 2 dogs, and they mean the world to me. And just the littlest things coming into the office, hey, Sergeant Burch, how's your family doing? How's your wife? That little things like that mean the world. So it's all about learning the individual, I would say, and finding out like what means the most to them and working with that. Like, it's things of that nature and catering to that, and even to go a little deeper, like, you seen that I was very passionate about becoming a warrant officer, and we spent many late nights redoing and reviewing and reviewing my resume over and over again until we felt it was both right and it looked good. And here I am now, a warrant officer, and things like that mean the world to me, and would mean the world to other soldiers, is taking the time and consideration and empathy about soldiers and their problems and being understanding. And I think that right there is one of the best qualities to have as a platoon leader, because at the end of the day, you are the end-all, be-all for that platoon. You are the moral compass of that platoon, and you set the environment for that platoon.
So I think one thing our company commander mentioned to me that stuck with me, a quote from Maya Angelou, and he said, "People won't remember what you said, but people will remember how you made them feel." So if you can make somebody who works with you, who works for you, feel that they are understood, feel that they are heard, feel like they belong, and that you care about them in an organization, then they will go farther for you. And part of that is, investing in the relationship, investing in getting to know what their ambitions are, what their aspirations are, what's going on in their life, because that's just going to create a better working relationship. I can tell because I've been on the receiving end, right? I've had superiors who got to know my family situation and knew that my, at the time, girlfriend, my wife, was visiting from the States, and they cared about that and cared about letting me off a little earlier to go spend that little amount of time that I had. So stuff like that, it's getting to know your subordinates' situation and ambitions. And for you, it was getting that flight packet in. And look at you now. You are Mr. Burch, flying airframes. So given your interactions with officers from different branches, we're going to promote the infantry here a little bit. What would you say differentiates infantry officers from their peers?
Pride. 100% pride. As an infantry officer, you, in my opinion and through my experience, you are one of the most well-rounded soldiers in the United States Army, without a doubt. Because as an infantry officer and infantry in general, you learn to take on 1,000 different tasks. You learn how to, manage property books. You know how to run CBurn. You learn how to run vehicle maintenance and how to read the bombs, how to read all the different equipment reports. Like, as an infantry officer, you're not just stuck in one lane. You are stuck with multitude of different experiences that vary day to day. One day you may be working on a $13 million property book because you're signed for 4 strikers, and the next day you're learning how to sign over and inventory a CBurn mask and learning all the different components. You're not stuck with just one job your entire career. You're very well-rounded as a soldier. So even for your example, coming from an infantry officer now to an instructor at an ROTC, like, you're very well-rounded. You've done a little bit of everything that the infantry has to offer, from all the different training missions where you learned how to work radios, where you learned how to fill radios, shoot, call for fire, be a forward observer, to the simple things as, like statement charges, to bombs, reading, fixing vehicles. Like, you can't beat that. You're not just stuck with one skill set. You've learned many.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree, and that's something that as I spend more time here as an instructor, I feel like the viewers, the cadets who aren't familiar with what the infantry does, don't understand that about the infantry and combat arms, because it's pretty easy to hear about quartermaster as a part of the logistics branches, or adjutant general corps as a personnel services branch, and see how that translates to the civilian sector, right? Like, okay, human resources for AG and supply chain logistics for quartermaster or transportation. Like, that's a direct translation. It's easy to see that. But what I find that cadets don't see and isn't immediately available information to is how much an infantry or an armor, or I would stick to infantry and armor officer, has their hands in all different sides of the pie. Because truth is, the support branches support whom? The maneuver branches. So the quartermaster, the ordnance, the transportation is working to support the maneuver effort. So me as a platoon leader, I reach out to the maintenance officer to coordinate for the maintenance of my strikers, of my M4s. I reach out to the battalion S1, to the AG section, to cover down on, or to help me out with one of my soldiers' admin actions. So I am touching different parts of the enterprise and getting experience in all of them, as opposed to being stuck on one silo, on one foxhole, and not getting to see everything else. So that is something that I want my cadets to understand, and anybody who watches this video, as the infantry officer, you are executing, you're making decisions, you are getting reps at leadership, at mission planning, operations, and you are also getting expertise and exposure and experience in property management, logistics planning. Why? Because you are the one moving. You are planning your own logistics, your own resupply for your movement, for your maneuver. So you have your hands on everything. Okay, so well-roundedness. And then let's go to our 7th question. So earlier on in the video, you mentioned that you really like being a technical expert, taking pride in being a technical expert as an infantry non-commissioned officer. But can you speak to the non-tactical, soft people skills that your training as an infantry NCO have provided you, and how have these enabled you to be more versatile and adaptable?
So I'll start from the beginning. So once you hit in the infantry, once you hit as an enlisted side, that E4, starting to become a team leader spot, the Army really wants you to be a pit bull. They want you to be aggressive. They want you to be dominant. And, for a long time, that was my lifestyle. And then I changed. I got married, I had kids, and then I had a really good platoon leader who really changed my outlook on life, that you don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be that dictator. People will trust you and follow you if they respect you and not disrespect your rank. And that was a huge eye-opener for me, is that I can get through a lot more soldiers by being understanding of their problems, being reasonable and empathetic, which is crazy. Like, that's what I learned in the infantry from my platoon leader, is be understanding, be empathetic. Like, you don't have to yell all the time. You don't have to, cuss, be derogatory. Understand your soldiers, understand their problems. And I think that alone has driven me further in my career than anything else. Because now actually I listen to people. I listen to understand, not to respond. I don't make accusations. I don't accuse people or soldiers of doing just the wrong thing anymore. I listen to their problem because for a long time, you're always taught right time, right place, right uniform. You can't be wrong, but if you're not there, then you're wrong. So that was in my mindset for so long. And then I understand, like, stuff happens. Like, we're all human. We're all put our pants on the same way. And it took me a long time to realize that, like, mistakes happen, but that doesn't define an individual. Be understanding and help build a person up and not just tear them down. So that's probably one of the moral compasses that I learned from my past platoon leader that is still stuck with me today, is just be empathetic and understanding of everybody's problems, because you never know what's on the other side of that door.
And that's important. Without that empathy and that trust, that fire team, that squad won't follow you. And the critical part about being in the infantry, in the maneuver branches, is that the job is harder, right? Like, we are not in air conditioned environments. We are not comfortable. So we have to ask our teams and soldiers to follow us in adverse conditions, when it's not comfortable, when you're tired, when you're hungry, and developing that relationship, getting the ability to practice that inspiration, that motivation, and that leadership is something that is unparalleled in other spaces, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's key to highlight, that you get to practice that small unit leadership, that team building, that relationship building in adverse environments where it's 10 times harder to get people to do what you're asking. So you don't get that from the comfort of the talk.
Yeah.
Okay. And then,
yeah, and another thing I would have to definitely say is I had a platoon sergeant for a short term, and he said this quote all the time, and it was so funny, but it really makes sense. Like, the further I've gotten in my career, is like, the more you go up, the more you forget about where you came from. And I think it's important you remember where you came from. And the further you go up, you have to remember that you work for the soldiers. The soldiers don't work for you. And I think that's a big eye-opener in humility and other concepts as well. Is like, just thinking about it, is like, they're right. I work for my soldiers. My soldiers don't work for me. I work for them to ensure that they have a better life. They have better success. They have more opportunities than I did. And I think that's a saying that should be carried throughout the military in general, is to remember to work for your soldiers.
absolutely, that's the concept of servant leadership, right? Like, you don't work for your boss, you serve your soldiers. You are in the position where you can facilitate growth for your soldiers. So if you all keep in your mind, like, you're never going to be wrong when you work for your soldiers, while still keeping, the mission, still accomplishing the mission, but caring for your soldiers, that you're going to succeed. So I think that's a good transition to our final question. What advice or encouragement would you offer a cadet who is thinking about branching infantry?
Honestly, knowledge is power. I would say do it. I would say give it your all if you decide to go infantry. Trust your squad leaders. Trust is a huge thing, but more importantly is, I've seen time and time again with new lieutenants coming in, is learn to delegate. Delegation is a huge responsibility of lieutenant. You already have the weight of the world on your shoulders as a platoon leader. You have it coming from the battalion brigade commander. You have it coming from your company commander, your peers, your squad leaders. Like, you can't do everything. Regardless if it's paperwork, regardless if it's a layout, learn to trust your squad leaders and your soldiers and delegate the authority. You don't have to delegate it all away, but always learn to delegate, and then also trust but verify. So if you told me to go to the motor pool, lay all this stuff out, call you when it's done, and boom, I say, hey, sir, everything's good to go, trust it. Verify it, though. You come down the motor pool, hey, everything's good to go, spot check a few things so you know that I'm on my P's and Q's and I'm doing the right thing. That's going to build that trust. But the biggest thing is delegation, humility, and trust and verify. You know, and as you said earlier, sir, like just learn to respect everyone equally and have that humility to come in and learn from those around you.
I meant to address that because you mentioned it earlier, but thank you for bringing it back up. Delegation, I laughed because that was probably my biggest weakness during my time as your platoon leader, trying to pull the organization all by myself, and that's just the wrong answer. I need to be enabling you as a squad leader and all the other squad leaders to grow, to give you more responsibility so that you can do my job. So absolutely, delegation is the act of empowering somebody else to get what needs to take charge of something that the platoon needs to do. But now instead of I'm doing 10 things, I am delegating that to Sergeant Burch so that he has an opportunity to plan this M4 range, to plan this movement. And that way, not only is he learning, but now he's practicing those mission planning skills. So absolutely, delegation is crucial, and it is stewarding your subordinates' growth, which is what we're there to do, right? We're there to develop leaders. So I appreciate your time, Mr. Burch. I'm still not going to get used to that. I appreciate the wisdom and the experience that you just shared with everybody listening in. And thank you for what you did, and best of luck to you as you transition to in your career. What do you want to fly?
Sir, honestly, I want to fly Blackhawks. Really anything but Apache. But
Okay.
preferably Blackhawks. I want to do something different with my life. I want to try and do medevac. I want to try and help people more than I have in my past 10 years. So that's my goal with medevac right now.
Okay, so for everybody who again is still unfamiliar with the transition, Sergeant Burch put in a packet as an NCO, or you can do it as a soldier too, right?
Yes, sir.
A packet to transition to apply for warrant officer candidate school, and there's different branches that you can be a warrant officer, and not just flight, not just aviation. You can be a warrant in AG, in quartermaster.
Yeah, you can go quartermaster, logistician, supply, or same thing. I'm at S1. Anything from maintenance to food and services, you name it. Air defense. So there's like 58 different warrant officer jobs available.
Okay, so final thank you again, Mr. Burch. We're going to stop the recording now. Thanks everybody for listening. Bye-bye.